Okay, wow, Shadow of the Erdtree. We got the gameplay reveal trailer about 35 minutes ago as of the time of this recording. I've rewatched it several times and frantically jotted down some notes and half-baked thoughts, so let's do this, let's talk about what we just saw. So when I first saw this shot, I was like, oh my god, this is Melina, but I'm not sure. This doesn't look like Melina's clothing, so I'm guessing it's a new NPC or even Miquella himself in some unique form, looking at his own arm and cocoon, because that feels like something From would do. Open and close the trailer with Miquella himself. Random side note, the cloak or robe here actually reminds me of Ringfinger Leonhard from Dark Souls 3. The NPC says, pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. Shrive is a verb meaning to absolve, so I presume this is a follower of Miquella because we know Miquella was very beloved. He had his own knights, and this NPC is basically reinforcing what we already know about Miquella, that was awesome, one of the more pure and well-intentioned characters within this world. And we're obviously at Mogwyn Palace, presumably after defeating Mohg. Mohg, of course, kidnaps Miquella from the Erdtree, where he's been meditating on some kind of solution to his eternal child syndrome situation and his sister Melania's scarlet rot. Basically, Miquella, who we're told is the greatest of the Empyreans, is looking for answers to his family and the land's problems. Answers that might extend beyond the Golden Order. But Mohg, his half-brother, this cast-out omen, has had his omen blood reinvigorated with flame by the Formless Mother, some kind of outer entity, and has these, I guess, delusions of grandeur that by kidnapping his brother and harnessing his powers, they'll establish some kind of new dynasty. So when we find Mohg, he has poor Miquella in this bloodied cocoon. We put Mohg down, and then, yeah, I'm guessing that brings us up to this moment. There is nothing more terrifying. So that's a surprising follow-up to the first line. Terrifying to whom? The Golden Order? Forces we're yet to meet? Because a pure, radiant, and loving demigod sounds like exactly what the lands between needs. However, Miquella could certainly be getting in the way of the greater will. I also wonder how much of George R.R. Martin's lore is still at play here, because that's very much a Martin trope, this idea of the prince that was promised, this respectable, worthy figure who, instead of getting their moment in the sun, has something horrible happen to them, like Miquella here with his bloody, emaciated arm dangling out of this egg. And often, these kinds of characters in Martin's worlds have to operate in secret. So I wonder if that's what Miquella's doing in the Shadow Realm. As many people in the community speculated, I'm guessing we interact with the arm, and that's our portal into the Shadow Realm, almost like teleporting behind the Hydra to Artorias of the Abyss. And I was so curious where this expansion would fall within the sequence of the base game, and this would suggest it's very much a late game thing, given that you probably have to defeat Mohg in order to access it. So that's interesting. They're expecting you to be pretty powerful and pretty far along, and it almost feels like something you could do before or after you've hit credits, because the cocoon and the arm just remain in Mogwyn Palace regardless of what you do afterward. This certainly appears to be a new overworld of sorts. It's impossible to say if it's 100% new or will feature some remixed or reimagined assets and elements, kind of like Bloodborne's Old Hunters or like Zelda's Dark Worlds, but you can see symbolically, thematically, they're really leaning into this concept of shadows, because unlike much of the base game, this world looks very desaturated and devoid of life and energy. Dramatic shadows are pouring off that kind of Stormvale looking fortress there in the center, with a much grander and Orlando style castle in the background. That area way off in the top right also kind of reminds me a bit of your view in Liurnia up to the Moonlight Altar plateau. And if you zoom in on the chapel up there, honestly, it kind of looks like what you'd imagine Manus Celis would look like if it weren't reduced to rubble. Which goes back to, is this the past, the future? Maybe neither. Maybe more of a dream realm, a different dimension where elements of the past, the present, and the future can coexist in like a signature from Soft kind of way. Okay, so this definitely looks like a totally new field we've never been in before. All these gravestones, just like the banners and ghost people in the base game, are remnants of the past, right? Even Melina channeling the words of Marika in her chapels throughout the lands between. You sense that in this world, events that transpire leave long-lasting impressions. Some interesting chaos-style branches creeping off of that cliffside above too, and this settlement off to the right looks new. This is giving me very strong Godwin Deathbed Dream vibes. The color palette, the skybox, much of this landscape, if not all of it, looks entirely new. The architecture is reminding me of Lord of the Rings too. It's very grand, it's very high fantasy. There's tons of verticality. The entire landscape graduates up toward the tree or trees, which I had originally speculated that this is the Halig tree wrapped around and strangling the Erdtree. I'm still not off that idea, especially given the Miquella connection here and us knowing that Miquella was searching for answers beyond the order, beyond the will. So his tree grown from his own blood strangling the Erdtree, that would make a lot of sense symbolically. At the same time, is Miquella the type of demigod to actually strangle the life out of the Erdtree? Miquella just seems so non-violent, and as the text right here in the trailer says, he's kind, he's loving, but at the same time, we're told he's the most powerful Empyrean, and maybe he's gonna do what he feels he's gotta do. I don't know. But the detail that catches my eye most is the veils. Very reminiscent of Marika's bedchamber, which in her bedchamber, there's this skylight directly above her bed, allowing golden light from the Erdtree to cascade down onto her, which makes sense given that she's this vassal of the greater will. She's essentially the goddess of the world. I'll have to spend some more time thinking about what this could mean, though, beyond just being an incredible visual. Cool looking knight here with a cape and styled helm, kind of giving me Throne Watcher, Defender vibes. This symbol also looks a lot like the Great Rune of the Unborn from the base game, which you get from Renala clutching her amber egg that Radagon gave her, and there's this idea that this is the rune of unborn demigods. Melania's Great Rune also looks very similar. This also makes me think there's day and night cycles in the Shadow Realm, just like the base game, because we can still see the trees and the overworld here, but it's now clearly dark. Very cool armor set, very cool sword, big Roman vibes here. And we have an NPC possibly off screen saying, "In that forsaken place, blood must spill," probably referring to the Shadow Realm itself, which gets me thinking, is the Shadow Realm kind of a painted world where the people living here and the things going on here are somewhat independent, but also somewhat dependent and relative to the lands between? Very Havel-inspired armor set here. Lots of jars in this trailer too, which is a motif in all of FromSoft's games, especially Elden Ring. Now this is a really interesting shot. I love the mask and the hair. In the back, those kind of look like violet versions of Miquella's lily, but it's really hard to say what we're seeing. Big nameless city Nokron aesthetics here, some kind of dilapidated chapel, someone on a throne. I'm guessing this person isn't a boss, probably an NPC, maybe someone who's claimed dominion over the Shadow Realm, possibly, or a region of the Shadow Realm. The talking NPC continues, "The blood of your fellows, the Erdtree faithful." So yeah, I'm guessing some of the powers that be in this realm, for obvious reasons, are anti-Erdtree, anti-Golden Order, and anti-Greater Will. Maybe there's a lot of people loyal to Miquella here. Maybe some kind of rogue Miquella movement is playing out in this other realm while he's incapacitated in Mogwyn Palace. Or maybe his flesh is now dead, but his spirit has lived on, or his soul or consciousness is now in the Shadow Realm, because we know spirit and body can be separated in Elden Ring, like with Ranni, like with Godwin. Now this is what I'm talking about. This is Dark Souls 3 right here. Very Undead Settlement, very Farron Keep. Looks like the player on Torrent has some kind of crow feather cape on, galloping through the swamp, a bunch of birds ahead. And you notice the consistency of the color palette, this burnt amber orange, browns, white, and pale yellows. Now, when I first saw this, I kind of laughed. I went, oh my god, it's Ishin of Vashina. But I do wonder, this cloak gives you Morgott vibes a little bit. Now, Morgott holds his cloak together with a strand of rope. This person has like a very ornate pin. But I don't know, could this be Morgott or someone in the family line? Especially because we see this image after the narrator speaks of the Erdtree faithful, which if there was anyone who was faithful to the Erdtree to a fault, it was Morgott. And then the woman, probably not a deathbed companion, maybe a queen of some kind. I get slight perfumer vibes from her attire too, but I'm not sure. More jars. This looks like a really cool cave or dungeon. Hopefully there's the mini dungeons sprinkled all throughout the Shadow Realm too. I would love to see those come back, and I would love to see even more inventiveness there. Having just done a Let's Play of Broom Tower from DS2, yeah, big Broom Tower vibes here. But this is also the point in the trailer where they're clearly reinforcing biome diversity, from the swamp to the Nokron style place to this, and we're inside. It feels much more contained here. This makes you think the 3D platforming is very much coming back in the expansion. Now, another NPC comes in. This one says, "They were never saints," possibly referring to the adherents of the Golden Order. And this is probably a legacy dungeon. It looks so enticing. And you can still see the veils draped above the trees. And it looks like if you trace the image with your eyes, the higher you go into the sky, the darker everything becomes. So the top of this castle looks like it's crumbling and almost being eaten, kind of like Farah Mazula. So I wonder if whatever's happening in the sky or with the trees is also corrupting the environment. Perhaps it's like very on the nose in the sense that the higher you climb in the Shadow Realm, the higher you climb in this landscape, the more difficult the challenges are until you reach the trees. Now the NPC continues, "They just happen to be on the losing side of a war." Maybe referring to the Shattering. I'll come back to that later, but I love this enemy design. Almost like a Wicker Man, which Wicker Men were like big human-shaped creations that Celtic druids built and filled with humans and animals and lit on fire. And I like how the torso just very much looks like a basket containing the fire, which makes sense because fire in general feels pretty blasphemous in Elden Ring, from the frenzied flame to the blood flame to the giant's kiln to the fire monks. And this boss looks absolutely massive, Shadow of the Colossus scale here. I wonder if this is a unique boss or these are like new field bosses, but it looks really fun and kind of gimmicky too. You can see the player on torrent here, and I'm all about that. Fewer Malenia style fights and more weird stuff like this. It gives me Tower Knight vibes. This feels like an overt Brainsucker Bloodborne reference, so lots of people will be happy to see any kind of cosmic horror having a presence in the expansion, which you'd think, being a Shadow Realm, they'd have lots of room to play around with weird and disturbing designs. Maybe more importantly, though, we do see a moon, a mostly dark moon, but not fully dark. And the player character here is in the Carrion Knight set, so that's not insignificant, I'm sure. Like we saw the prisoner in the Broom Tower area, the wolf on horseback entering the overworld. So I don't know, just little details to remain mindful of. Heck yeah, this is so creepy. I kind of get Never-Ending Story vibes, or like Where the Wild Things Are, and I could see Miyazaki being into those works of fiction. There also appears to be omen horns all over this, I don't know, dog beast. And inside its mouth, you can see multiple layers of teeth. The inside ones look way more normal and human-like, and then the outer ones are very beast-like, and in the armor too. Like, I think we're looking at someone who transformed. And I love the idea of learning more about omens potentially in this DLC. I love the textural details in this boss arena too. The ornate floor, the fight itself looks really cool. The boss is channeling lightning too, which lightning in Elden Ring is often associated with the dragon cult, so that's worth remembering. And speaking of dragons, we learn at the end of the trailer that this boss is named Messmer the Impaler, and his whole aesthetic feels very Dragon Cult, very Dragon Knight, very Serpentine. Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light? I'm assuming that's Messmer speaking, so basically in plain English, Mom, would you really approve of making someone a lord if they were without light? Whose mother? I gotta think it's Marika. Marika is mother throughout pretty much the whole game. She's the matriarch of this world. There's also the formless mother, but yeah, I think he's referring to Marika. Marika seems to have some kind of presence in this expansion, and this magic here feels very Moog-ish to me, very blood flame. I mean, look at the size of his sword, almost like a mix of a spear, a sword, and a twin blade. He has 2 snakes coming off of him, one behind his head, one at his feet. He has magic abilities. I think Messmer, the boss fight, is going to be hell. This looks like some kind of cemetery. I love this enemy design. Again, very Dark Souls 3 with the tattered capes and candlesticks. Now that looks like a new dash, almost like a variant of Bloodhound Step. I also really like that upward swipe with that curved blade. This feels like they're showing off some new Dex gameplay here. New throwables possibly here. Maybe a faith build here, purifying some unholy enemies. I love the elevation and the spin and the pink particles. You see the butterflies as well. I'm sure that's significant. This could just be the tree we see here. It could just be environmental dressing or like the Shadow Realms version of a lesser Erdtree. The statue you see here too also looks like that dog beast boss. So that's clearly significant. He must be some kind of prominent figure in the Shadow Realm. And again, going back to this Painted Worlds idea, we know from Ariamis and Ariandel, Painted Worlds can just sort of have their own ecosystem, their own politics, their own happenings. So why wouldn't that happen in the Shadow Realm? Just the same. So here, God, I love From Software. We have a Bloodborne dressed character doing High Monk from Sekiro and maybe getting a posture break on this big knight. I love seeing kicking attacks. Here, I wonder if this exploding pot is actually something you just pick up in the environment organically, or if it's a usable item you carry with you, like throwing knives or the smaller craftable pots. I also wonder if there's a strength requirement to use them because they're so enormous. This is a very Lap or Lois style armor set here with a Gale style automatic crossbow that looks crazy OP. Validating a crossbow build would be a really fun thing for FromSoft to do here. And the particle effects are reminiscent of the perfume bottles, but I don't know, that could just be some overlap. I presume you two are keen to know just what Miquella is doing here, the NPC says. Again, making me think maybe Miquella's body is ruined in Moog's blood egg, but his spirit and mind and soul are continuing on in the Shadow Realm. Maybe his mission has simply continued here. If he's as powerful as everyone lets on that he is, you wouldn't think that Moog simply pulling him out of the Erdtree and taking him to Mogwyn Palace would be enough to stop him, right? Now that's awesome. Like a beowulf head, I'm guessing, much like the Dragon Communion incantations, that's what this looks like. Now this is sick. This shot, this vibe. I love the blue and the flowers. We are seeing some newer colors now, deviating from the color palette we were previously introduced to. This feels very samurai, very Japanese, showing a katana-wielding warrior blocking and slashing. We also see flowers like this outside of the Liurnia Divine Tower. I don't know if that's significant or not. This is so empty, this space. It almost feels like a PvP zone. It makes me think of the undead matches like the Hollow Arena from Dark Souls 3. And I think from a marketing perspective, they're specifically trying to appeal to hardcore Bloodborne and Sekiro fans wherever they can with this trailer, because this is obviously just video game porn for Demon's Souls and Dark Souls fans. Maybe a new variant of the Tree Sentinel here on an armored boar. Good God, they've thought of everything. Now this is just hilarious. I love it. These enemy designs are weird, right? Like, it does not feel like they're playing it safe in this expansion. The Shadow Realm does look, in terms of enemy designs, very bizarre in the best kind of way. This is like a cross between a hippo and an alligator. And again, the moon here. Wow, that attack. I love this. Like an abyssal horse with a Nashandra-looking skeleton on top throwing a bone boomerang at us. These enemies all feel pretty gimmicky, again, in the best sense of the word. I love it. You're not just seeing a bunch of giant knights with swords. Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death. Now, this clearly seems to be the guy from the painting earlier. Emaciated, basically a corpse with a sword or spear through him, a golden sword or spear, which I'm guessing he's about to pull out and use against us. His cloak is also gold, so he's very much Greater Will, Golden Order. It almost looks at the end of this shot like his head is about to completely come off here, like maybe it ends up on the end of the melee weapon as the corpse swings it at us. And then the Messmer boss battle in the embrace of Messmer's flame. So that makes you think there's some kind of alignment between Messmer and the Golden Order. He's an executioner, essentially. Come now, touch the withered arm and travel to the realm of shadow. Yeah, this makes me think that Miquella's followers have found him in Mogwyn Palace and that Miquella himself is there in the Shadow Realm for sure. Now, I wonder if this is a new aspect of the Crucible art. That's what it looks like, which the Crucible was like this precursor to the Erdtree, basically this primordial, this soup, this melting pot that gave birth to life, but also, based on what we know, was potentially dangerous. You didn't want to get too close to it. And all these wacky enemy designs feel very Crucible to me, like everything is kind of off and surreal. I will not be far behind May We Meet Again. That not only sounds like Miquella probably talking, but now I think we're clearly seeing Miquella maybe healing what's happening in the Shadow Realm, almost like moving his hand like Gold Mask. And here I feel like the vibe and the color palette are much more Duskborn ending, you know? And then Messmer makes the key art. Okay. Now, I want to jump to the copy that Bandai Namco put in the video descriptions of the trailer. It says, in the land of shadow, Miquella awaits the return of his promised lord, the player character, right? The land of shadow, a place obscured by the Erdtree. So that makes me think this is a place the Greater Will does not want you to go. And it's where goddess Marika first set foot. A land purged in an unsung battle set ablaze by Messmer's flame. So, yeah, that does make me think there's some kind of war playing out here in secret, literally in the shadows. Perhaps Miquella's forces against the forces of the Shadow Realm. It was to this land that Miquella departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage of all things golden. So, pretty much lines up with everything we were talking about, except that one line, a place obscured by the Erdtree where Marika first set foot. That's interesting. Marika has dialogue in the game that you hear through Melina about how she wanted to sort of shirk her blind faith and really start examining the Golden Order and the Greater Will. Maybe as part of that process, she ended up in the Shadow Realm. We still don't understand exactly how she and Radagon fused together. We know they were separate people up until a point, and then they became one. So I actually like that we may learn more about Marika in this expansion than we did in the base game. A quick note on Messmer, another M name, Melina, Miquella, Melania. So maybe he's part of the family tree. Him saying mother makes me think Marika, but again, we know there were these sort of like unborn demigods, and you know, there's a lot more to this family tree than just the kind of main cast of characters who serve as quest NPCs and bosses in the base game. So it also feels to me like he's maybe part of the Ancient Dragon cult or like its leader or something. I will say, compared to like a Morgott character who feels very complex and interesting and you really don't know what to make of him when you see him for the first time, Messmer feels a little generically evil. He's in red with wings and snakes and fire. He's on a throne. Again, the key art, this image, it's all good for marketing, I guess. Like, oh, there's the, big bad boss, prepare to die, all of that. He feels just a little uninteresting. And that's just an initial reaction that could change. But yeah, he's actually not the boss or enemy or character who gets me most excited when I'm watching this. Also, this expansion feels very faith dragon incantation oriented, even though I don't believe we see a dragon in the trailer itself. In the world of Elden Ring, I tend to find the glintstone sorcery stars stuff a bit more intriguing, and that all seems to be mostly absent, which is a tad disappointing to me personally. Like, if I had to choose between one or the other, I'm gonna lean Renala, Ronnie, Glintstone, Age of Stars. But as much as we're seeing here, we already know there's going to be a second trailer because they call this the first trailer, and you know they never show their full hand ahead of time. Again, I think Marika has some kind of presence here. I think we're going to learn more about her, maybe what happened to her, and maybe she'll be redeemed a little bit through this expansion, because she's not a very sympathetic character in the base game. She's pretty awful, honestly. I still would like to learn more about Godwyn, and this all feels, from the color palette to, the Miquella stuff, it all feels very Godwyn adjacent, so hopefully he's addressed in some kind of way. But the meat and potatoes here, the exploration, the gameplay, new combat arts, enemy designs, all that stuff looks great. Super fun, as expected. And I think June is good. June is fine. It means they're not rushing this by any means. It's something to look forward to. It doesn't have to upend our lives on short notice. And yeah, we have even more time to think about it, prepare for it, revisit the base game. I was also expecting a little bit more of like a Scholar of the First Sin package, but I wonder if this opens the door to even more expansions in the future. So that's what I've got for you. I'll probably have more thoughts down the line, but I just wanted to get this sort of initial reaction, these initial impressions recorded and out there. And I'm very eager to hear what you think and what you make about all of this. That's a pretty dense 3-minute trailer. So as always, you can find links to my Discord server and my Patreon page down in the description. Likes and subs here on the channel are always appreciated. If you enjoyed this discussion, I have tons more FromSoft content going back 3 years here on the channel, so feel free to go back, check some of that stuff out. Thanks again for watching, and I will catch you next time.